I don't know, Joe. We're getting better in a lot of areas. Defensively, we didn't start out the season very good. We continue to get better. Last 2 weeks, we played better and better. Even missing some of the guys that we were missing, but we still haven't put it all the way together yet. And if we do that, then I think we have a chance to be pretty good.
Welcome into Purple Daily. Phil Mackey, Judd Zulgad, Declan Goff producing. We're going to get to our nerd football stats of the week. A lot of interesting telling things, but off that soundbite you just heard from Mike Zimmer, Judd Zulgad, do you think the Vikings have withheld their best football so far this year? And what do you think their best football looks like if they haven't played it yet?
I think in Mike Zimmer's mind, they have definitely not played their best defensively, because I think in his mind, he can manipulate and play call this defense into being something that I guess I have my doubts about. Okay. So because when Mike talks about things like we haven't played our best football or we can improve, often he's talking about his defense because that's his pride and joy and that's his baby. What do I think it looks like? I actually think that if we were to see if the Vikings have another gear, and look, the last 2 games, the last 3 games have not been pretty, right? Dallas loss, Carolina game definitely was not perfect, and Jacksonville was incredibly flawed. I actually would say that the Vikings, if they were to reach what could be their peak for 2020, it would probably be more on offense than defense, because I think the defense is getting by, but the line again is not great. The corners are improving, but they're certainly not great yet. So I think that if Mike was to delve into what he mentioned and we were to go deeper on that subject, Phil, I think the reality is we would probably disagree, because if there is another gear or two to be had from this team, I think it's probably on the offensive side of the ball, more on defense. My guess is Mike was talking more about defense.
It kind of feels like, he's always talking about defense, right?
Yeah.
Like, is he ever not referring to defense?
That's my assumption.
Yeah, when he says we haven't played our best football yet, I'm thinking, all right, wait a second. Offensively against the Packers, you guys handed off to those games where Dalvin Cook went for 200 plus yards and Kirk was just perfect playing off play action. Even the last 3 games, I think Kirk has thrown for 300 yards the last 3 games, if I'm not mistaken, right? Now, there's been some mistakes in there. Offensively, there's probably still another level even, but they've been pretty damn good offensively. And the defense has been the thing that, they gave up a couple drives in the 4th quarter to Dallas, and they let the Mike Glennon march down and tie the game, and then 2-point conversion.
And the Panthers darn near did too.
Yeah, they squeaked that game out.
Missed the field goal.
I'm trying to think of what they're like if they were to just bring a complete game to the table, or if we were to take their complete A game over the course of a month. I think their offense rivals every team's offense except for Kansas City at its peak, I think. And it's not because, like, if Seattle's offense is operating at its peak and the Vikings offense is operating at its peak, I think it's much more Russell Wilson centric to get to the 35 points than it would be Kirk Cousins centric for the Vikings. The Vikings offense at full strength is like Dalvin running for 150 and 200 and Kirk hitting bombs to Jefferson and Thielen off play action, and they score, 5 touchdowns or something.
Right.
So the method would look different. I think if every offense is playing at their best, Kansas City is still head and shoulders above everyone else, but the Vikings are in that next tier conversation at their best because of Dalvin and because of the way Kirk plays off play action. I don't think if their defense is playing at its best, the upside is like top 3 defense in the league for a month.
You don't think it's 2,000 Ravens at this point?
There's not enough pass rush. As great as Cam Dantzler has looked at times, including a spectacular game against the Jaguars, they still have enough inexperience at those cornerback positions to get torn apart a little bit. And teams like the Jaguars are going to score 24 points on you because they can pick on a Chris Boyd or somebody else. But I think like at their best, if the offense is clicking and the defense is, let's say, average compared to the rest of the league, that's enough to do some damage and maybe you win a playoff game or two. If that total package is still lurking in the weeds over the next month and a half, 2 months or so.
Do you think that this defense can stop a really good quarterback who gets hot?
No. I guess
that would be my question. And then can you go, if that takes place, can you go toe-to-toe with Kirk and how this offense runs with a quarterback on the other side who gets hot against your defense?
We'll do more of a deep dive into Tampa later this week, I'm sure, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense, the way Bruce Arians wants it to run, operating at full strength, is like the exact thing you don't want to see if you're the Vikings defense, right?
Sure.
It's great wide receivers, an accurate quarterback, and the play calling is designed for chunks down the field. And you're asking potentially Jeff Gladney, Cam Dantzler, I would trust more than anyone, but you're asking like rookie cornerbacks or Chris Boyd to line up on Antonio Brown, or hey, Jeff Gladney going to need you to cover Chris Godwin and prevent him from catching 9 passes for 106 yards.
That's my question.
So this is actually kind of the kryptonite game. The rest of their schedule, the Saints, the Vikings seem to have a pretty good formula for containing the Saints over the last couple of years, and I think Drew Brees is more banged up and a lesser version of himself than when the Vikings have already beat that team in bigger games. Not that that's a guaranteed win for the Vikings by any means, but the toughest game on the schedule, matchup wise, and probably just in terms of the weapons you're going to face, is the game this Sunday against Tampa Bay for the defense. That's my 2 cents.
Yes, I agree. Here's my comeback, though. This is the type of game facing Brady, coming off a bye, yes, but he's not playing great. This is the exact type of game where Zimmer's ability to game plan and be creative plays a huge role. Like, I actually think Jacksonville and the Panthers are bigger problems, because I don't know that Mike really schemes those game plans up. But when they play the Saints or the Bucs and Brady, I think he does. So I'm really curious. But before I say that the Vikings are going to lose, I am curious as to what the game plan is going to be, because this is where Mike shines. And Mike, to go back to the playoff game against the Saints last season, has the ability to throw off veteran, really good QBs. So that's the one thing.
Yep, I agree with that.
That's one thing.
And I think if anyone can take a group of inexperienced rookie caliber players and backup guys that are just sort of filling in and scheme it to make uncomfortable Tom Brady uncomfortable, Mike Zimmer would be the first defensive mind that I would choose. We'll see if it's enough on Sunday, and we'll dive more into that game. But we got to get to our nerd football stats of the week, powered by Federated Mutual Insurance Company. Federated has been helping business owners in the state of Minnesota for over 100 years, and they just announced My Shield, which, if you're a business owner, My Shield is your personalized online destination for risk management resources for your business. You can access My Shield 24/7, computer, tablet, smartphone, My Shield app. If you want to find out more, if you're a business owner out there, go to federatedinsurance.com and click on Meet My Shield. At Federated, remember, it's our business to protect yours.
Get those nerds! Nerds!
Judd, why don't you throw the first nerdy stat out? You did a deep dive on Justin Jefferson compared to Randy Moss's rookie season.
12 games in, and I have been, I think, in town at the forefront of saying, get Justin Jefferson the ball more, right? Like, he needs the ball more. And I think he had 12 targets and 9 catches against the Jaguars on Sunday, but he had 2 targets and 2 catches in the first half, which I deemed to not be enough. So I thought to myself, 12 games into his rookie season in 1998, where was Moss at compared to Justin Jefferson? And what I found was, I thought, intriguing. 12 games into his first year, Jefferson is at 84 targets, 61 catches, 1,039 yards, and 7 touchdowns, okay? Moss, comparatively, same amount of games. Jefferson at 84 targets, Moss was at 76. Catches. Jefferson, I said, is at 61. Moss was at 47.
Wow.
Yards. Jefferson, 1,039 yards. Moss was at 1,014. The only substantial difference that is advantage Randy, touchdowns, 7 for Jefferson, 11 at that time for Moss.
So Moss was only catching like 3 to 4 passes per game at this point, 12 games into the 1998 season.
Yes, sir.
So they were really, really just using him as a run down the field. We'll either find you or we won't. They'll either double, triple cover you, in which case we'll go underneath the Chris Carter, Jake Reed, whoever else. I sort of had it in my head that they were using him more.
So did I.
But they weren't.
No, they weren't.
So as much as we complain about Justin Jefferson's lack of targets, Randy Moss, 1998, I'm retroactively outraged that the Vikings didn't use him more.
The question is, do you think that Carter was a better receiver than Thielen, which justified them in their minds going to Carter more?
Yes.
Or do you think that those two are equal or close to?
No, the 1998 version of Chris Carter was like coming off of setting the NFL, a couple of years earlier, setting the NFL record for catches in a season.
Yes.
And I think Adam Thielen's one of the 10 to 15 best wide receivers in the league, but Chris Carter was like the guy, possession, third down, red zone. Adam Thielen is diet Chris Carter. And Adam Thielen might wind up in the Vikings Ring of Honor, but I don't think there's discussion about Adam Thielen being in the Pro Football Hall of Fame quite yet.
That's right.
He'd have to do this for a long time. So that's really interesting.
I'll dial it back, though. Just a bit, but I will dial it back a little bit.
So the numbers are very similar. The eras are different. The teams are just throwing the ball more, although the Vikings are bottom 5 in the league in pass attempts going into last week.
Yes.
I can go see where it stands now. So take the numbers aside for a second. As you just remember Randy Moss's career and his rookie season, and you're watching Justin Jefferson's play out, would you put Justin Jefferson on the level of young Randy Moss?
Okay, that's a really difficult question because of this. When Moss entered the league, he changed the game because it was so new, right? Like Moss brought a skill set that had existed, but not like he did it, right? Yeah. Like spectacular catches. And you could have Cunningham throw the ball up and say, he's going to catch it. So it's a difficult question to answer because the timing of what Moss did when he did it changed, in my opinion, the league significantly. That being said, I think the fair answer to your question is they are very close. I think that's fair. I'm
trying to think too. It's such an impossible bar to meet what Randy Moss represented for that position in 1998.
Of course,
I don't even know what like a new bar would look like now. Receivers. I think receivers make more ridiculous catches now because a million different reasons. I think they train from the age of like 10 to be able to make one-handed Odell Beckham Jr. catches. It's sort of like the Steve Nash effect among shooting guards in the NBA, where it's like, hey, you better be able to shoot from 40 feet.
Absolutely.
And practice from, but
Moss changed that.
Like receivers from a young age have literally been practicing. You got mossed for 15 or 20 years now.
Right.
How do you go up in traffic and bring one down one-handed? So the bar is impossible to compare because Randy Moss set a new type of wide receiver loose in the NFL. Justin Jefferson, I don't think is like I don't think he's doing things that Odell Beckham Jr. wasn't doing or that DeAndre Hopkins wasn't doing. He's doing it at that level as a rookie. And that's awesome. And the Vikings are going to benefit from that for 5 or 10 years. What would a new bar look like? Like what would the Randy Moss 2020 equivalent look like in a wide receiver now? Like what would they have to be doing that we aren't already seeing among the top 5 or 6 guys, including Jefferson?
I don't think it exists. I think the game has now changed and Moss to me is a Babe Ruth type because he altered the game and the game changed. And then guys come along after that and one up that, but they don't change the game. So I don't know that when it comes to the passing game itself, Phil, that there is a new bar to reach as far as that's the new Moss. But I think when we watch Jefferson, my appreciation is there are, a handful or possibly slightly more of these just outstanding receiver types now. And in his first year, 12 games in, Justin Jefferson fits in that group.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to for 1 second sell the kid short because he's great, but I don't know that he has the ability or anyone who comes along now has the ability to change the game like Moss did. Because like Moss gave, in my opinion, the league and teams ideas. Like the Rams. The Rams were like, holy cow, let's do this. Let's do that. And he was the guy. When you go back and watch what he did at that time, and that I'll always go back to the fact that Ron Wolf, a Hall of Fame GM from Green Bay, in the next draft, April of 1999, drafted, I believe, 3 consecutive defensive backs who were 6 feet or taller because of Moss. So as far as that alteration goes, I don't think it can be replicated now because of what Moss started.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So I'm trying to be fair here.
And so I guess the summation of this is that Justin Jefferson is every bit as impactful in today's NFL for this Vikings team to elevate their offense as Randy Moss maybe was in 1998. It's just a different, like Randy Moss made such a splash because, oh my God, you can just like take a snap, throw a ball 50 yards in the air, and he's going to run under it. You can't overthrow him. You just never seen some of these things before.
It's like a punt. Yeah.
We've seen almost everything there is to see with talented wide receivers now, and Justin Jefferson is playing at the top of that pool.
Yes. Now, here's the difference. So the more thought I give this, I think the difference is this. In 98, quarterbacks, including Cunningham at that time, were willing to sort of throw up jump balls, right?
Yeah, interceptions were sort of becoming taboo.
They were, but not totally yet. Yeah. 1, Kirk doesn't like to. And 2, what you just said is exactly right, which is if I throw up a jump ball and it gets picked, it's a reflection on me. If you cut Justin Jefferson loose with the quarterback who's like, you know what, picks are picks. That's where I think we miss his potential greatness, because Cunningham, I never got the sense that he truly cared, in part because I think he knew that 90% of the time back then, Moss was going to come down with the football, right?
Yeah.
Like Kirk's not going to do that. Like Kirk can make the throw, and he will, and we saw it on Sunday. But I think in Kirk's mind, the circumstances have to be right. I think in Cunningham and Billick and Denny Green and Moss's mind, if Moss ran a pass pattern, it meant the circumstances were right.
So it's a good segue into just another bonus nerd stat for you. Okay, they track something in the NFL called catch percentage, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's the percentage of receptions divided by how many times you were targeted. So this isn't necessarily a referendum on accuracy, but it's, over the course of a season, you were targeted 100 times, you caught 70 passes. That means your catch percentage was 70. Now, could the other 30 have been sailing over your head and you had no chance? That's where it doesn't tell the whole story. But so take this with a grain of salt. Justin Jefferson has caught 73% of his passes so far in his rookie season. Randy Moss caught only just over 50%, 55% of his passes in 1998. Now, is that to mean that Randy just he was unreliable and dropped a lot of passes? No, it means Randall Cunningham was just throwing the ball up to him. Interceptions be damned sometimes. Not that he threw a bunch of picks in 98. It was just there's 2 guys on him and I don't give a rip. I'm gonna cock it and throw it, baby.
Absolutely.
And so Randy Moss is the best receivers in the NFL are sitting in 2020 around a 70 to 75% catch rate. Jefferson was at 80% up until a couple weeks ago. Just nuts. And some of that's Cousins. Cousins is accurate and he's only throwing it to Jefferson. He's not just closing his eyes and throwing it up, right?
Right.
Randy Moss catch percentages in his first few years in the league, okay? 55%, 58%, 60%, 53% with Dante in that second year, 57%. With Oakland, it was 48% and 44%. Again, and this is still 2005, the quarterback era is starting here, but Oakland didn't have great quarterbacks, and they're just I don't know, run down the field.
Yes.
And we'll just throw it down there and see what happens,
yep.
Right? So if Randy Moss came into this, and he could run a route too. It wasn't like he was a one route pony. Randy Moss could run a route.
Absolutely.
Maybe not Adam Thielen style, but if you put Randy Moss in today's NFL and quarterbacks are more accurate, and I think quarterbacks paid more attention to just making sure that we're not just throwing up prayers to you, he'd probably catch fewer passes in some of these seasons, but he would almost certainly have higher catch percentages because the targets would be more realistic for him.
So what was Moss's catch percentages when he got to New England to play with Brady? Do you have that?
About 60%.
Okay.
60%, 55, 60%.
So
And again,
solid,
like a lot of his routes were down the field routes. Like they were, if now I always contested, if you told Randy Moss, you can't run a go route, you can only run underneath stuff. Like you have to play slot. Would he have been a Julian Edelman, Larry Fitzgerald, like caliber slot receiver? Not necessarily.
He'd been retired quickly.
And he had the alligator arm sometimes. But if like he had to do that, if it was just, hey, third down, close quarters, I think he could have been great in that regard too. Mm-hmm. But he knew that his strength was going down the field and he was going to milk that, A, because it led to more touchdowns and yards, but B, it was also like less likely to get you decapitated over the middle and it preserved his career.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, good stuff on Justin Jefferson. Our next nerd football stat of the week. Let's talk about the Vikings skill position players here. Are they the best in the NFL collectively when you look at running back Dalvin Cook and the wide receivers? According to Pro Football Focus, going into the month of December here, or the second week in December, Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen are ranked as the third and fourth best wide receivers in the NFL. Devontae Adams is number one with the Packers. And Dalvin Cook is ranked as the second best running back in the NFL, behind only Damian Harris from New England, who's in his second year, third round draft pick last year.
Really?
Just like doesn't have nearly as many snaps, but like he's qualified.
Okay, I didn't expect you to say that.
So, so if you kind of took him off and said, all right, that's a weird New England anomaly, and he's part of a system of running backs. Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, all regarded as top four at their position going into this week. So by that measure, the Vikings might have the best collective group of skill position players in the NFL.
Yeah, I could see that. Cook is so good, and the offense revolves around him so much that it makes sense. I'm trying to think off the top of my head if there is a group of skill position players that I would prefer from a different team. I guess if it's operating on all cylinders, I might consider the Saints, right? With Kamara.
Chiefs are pretty ridiculous at wide receiver, too.
And Chiefs. I think it's very fair to say that the Vikings are probably, if not the top, that they would be in the top 3 to 5 for sure.
Yeah.
Five is a slam dunk. 3 is probably a debate, but they would, if you take what they do with their players, I think it's very fair to say that you could argue it into being top 3 without a huge problem.
Yeah, the missing ingredient would be the tight end. You don't have like a Travis Kelce level tight end.
Well, the Irv Smith thing to me is like, I'm still curious.
You have the depth. If assuming Irv Smith was healthy, you have the depth. I mean, you can make a case that maybe you had the 2 best tight end sets, but are one of those guys top 5 right now? Probably not.
Yeah, like I'll gladly take a Travis Kelce or what Darren Waller is doing in Las Vegas over, Kyle Rudolph. Kyle Rudolph's fine, but like if I throw him the ball, he's not going to run 20 yards and truck a safety.
No, he's just going to get tackled pretty much after a gain of 4 yards or 5 yards, right?
Yeah. Dalvin Cook's usage. You found this from our guy Ben Gessling at the Star Tribune, okay?
Do you have this? This is incredible.
So Cook, this is, man, either you're fine with this or you're like, wow, pump the brakes and we'll see what happens at the end of the year. So Dalvin Cook ended the day on Sunday with 32 carries and 6 catches, touching the ball more times, 38, than any non-quarterback in Vikings history other than Ted Brown, who had 39 touches on November 8th, 1981. So let that sink in. 60 years of Vikings football. Yep. Dalvin Cook just touched the ball more on Sunday against the Jaguars, a 1-win Jaguars team, than any player except Ted Brown, who had 39 on November 8th, 1981.
Yep.
Dalvin Cook now has 4 games of at least 30 touches this season, more than any NFL player since Le'Veon Bell had 6 such games for the Steelers in 2017. He has handled the ball 182 times in the Vikings' past 6 games and a league-high 286 times on the season, despite missing a game against the Falcons with a groin injury.
Yep.
If Cook touches the ball an average of 28.5 times over the Vikings' last 4 games of the regular season, he will be just the NFL's 20th player in the last 20 years to record 400 touches in a season. He needs only 103 more touches to surpass the franchise record of 388 that Adrian Peterson recorded in his 2012 MVP season. So we're reaching like 99th percentile historically of usage in NFL history.
Back
for
to the
Dalvin
future.
Cook.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
We are
That's it.
in 1977, right? As
It is,
far as
yeah.
like usage goes. And backs back then didn't catch passes. I'm just talking about from a rushing standpoint workload. 2 questions off of this. I'll start you with the second one. Because I'm not going to debate that Cook is a marvelous player, okay? Big picture. Can this formula, okay, with the skill position players that this team has, can this work to win you a championship? Because this is the stats basically paint a picture of this is flying in the face of the formula of the majority of teams and how they approach football in 2020.
No, it cannot win you a championship. If you were doing these things and you had the best defense in the NFL, could it win you a championship? Yes. If you were doing these things at a slightly scaled back rate, like the Vikings were in 2009, where like definitely have a bell cow running back, want to use them a lot. We're going to chop off like 15, 20% of that usage so that the quarterback can operate, so that Kirk can cook. Kirk can sing, as Declan says.
Let Kirk sing.
Mr. Gawad, as I call him now.
Mr. Quad.
Also, like he's one of the more injury prone, whether it's
don't tell
his
him
fault or
that.
not. Like he gets hurt.
Don't tell him that.
So I'm torn. And I saw our friend Mark Craig from the Star Tribune was tweeting about this yesterday, and so I'm sort of torn between what he said, which is, listen, you sign the guy to a contract, he makes a lot of money, he's a bell cow until proven otherwise. Like you have to feed him the ball.
Mm-hmm.
What are you saving him for? Are you guaranteed that like if you don't use those carries now, you can then use them next year? They transfer over like your vacation days. I mean, is there any proof of that either? I think there's proof that if you ride a guy for 400 carries, it's pretty likely he's going to get hurt the next year.
Yeah, you're
time after time. Christian McCaffrey this year, whether it's directly correlated or not, high usage leads to some sort of problem in the future. So are the Vikings, by doing this, I think the question is, by doing this year with Dalvin Cook, are they essentially guaranteeing that he drops off the planet next year, either physically or otherwise? I mean, signs point to the answer being yes quite often in the NFL.
And does a team that won one of its first 6 games think it's good enough that it's smart to give a guy almost 40 touches against the Jacksonville Jaguars? That's my question.
Ideally, you can beat that team without doing that.
You should be able to, right? Like that shouldn't be. And I get, so here's my case against what they're doing. If he was all that you had, I'd be like, all right, I sort of get this. Like, that's it. Like, if this is Aroma Shadu and Jenkins at receiver, right? If this is a broken down tight end and that's it, I'd say, okay, you don't have a lot here. I don't like it, but I get it. But we just talked about, and Phil, your question to me was, do the Vikings possibly have the best set of skill position players in the NFL? Not in the division, in the entire league.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess my question becomes, is there a workaround here to cut down on this guy's load? Which, by the way, he went into the Jacksonville game with an ankle injury that stopped him from practicing in full until Friday. And it was very evident to me in watching that game on Sunday that he didn't have that secondary burst, okay? So this was definitely not a guy operating at full strength, and he touched the ball almost 40 times. I guess my question to the Vikings is, one, how far do you think that you can go in 2020 with this plan? And two, what does this say about your reliance on the run game in a pass-first league? To which I'm going to go back to your guy now, Mr. Gawad, who's playing pretty well. I mean, Mr. Gwad's playing pretty well, right?
That would be Mr. Game-winning Drive to you, okay? You're not on a shorten the nickname basis with him, okay?
Mr. GWD.
Mr. Game-winning Drive.
Listen, I look at Gawad.
And by the way, it's my guy, Mr. Game-winning Drive.
Okay, your guy,
to you, okay?
your guy is playing pretty well right now. And I say, wouldn't this be the perfect time to transition some of your trust tree to him to see?
Ordinarily, I think the answer here would be yes. Here's part of the problem. you're going to deal with against the Buccaneers. All right, I'm going to give you a couple. The Buccaneers have a good defense.
And it's a outstanding run defense.
So the Buccaneers have allowed the fewest rush yards per game of any team in the NFL, 74.2. And they've also allowed the fewest rush yards per carry at 3.3. So you think, all right, that means you're probably going to want, like, you'll show run, but this is probably going to have to be a Kirk game, and you're going to have to sling it around the old lot, Justin Jefferson, etc. Well, here's the other problem, okay? Since we're doing nerd football stats this weekend. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense gets the fourth most pressure percentage-wise on opposing quarterbacks of any team in the NFL. They get a 26% pressure rate on opposing quarterbacks. That's the best in the NFC, by the way. So they're the best pass rushing pressure team in the NFC. So they're good at everything defensively. In today's, there is no 85 Bears defense in today's NFL. So like by today's defensive standards, the Buccaneers are one of the best in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
If you just drop back and you don't show run over the course of 3 hours, that pass rush is going to be a problem for a non-mobile quarterback in my guy, Mr. Game-winning drive, Kirk Cousins, okay?
Yes, You're right.
So even though they stop the run, you almost have to use Dalvin Cook as a sacrificial lamb just to get your passing game going this weekend.
Sure.
So sorry, Dalvin. I know that your usage rate is up and you're banged up, but you still have to touch the ball even for show against this defense this week.
Absolutely. But that's the point about the almost 40 carries or touches against the, at the time, 1-10, now 1-11 Jaguars. That's the point. Is I thought, okay, they're going to transition a little bit away from, let's say he carries the ball 25 times. And I know his backup was out, but the point was, I thought that they would try to get him prepared for Tampa. And instead, they're going to go in and be like, let's do it again. Let's do it again. But the main point for me is, can the formula as they're doing it, because they've got some personnel here, can the formula as they're executing it, can that work to get them and this show to the stated goal of a Super Bowl championship at some point?
Yeah. I got two more for you here. Nerd football stats. Vikings cornerback update for you. So Pro Football Focus lists 132 qualified cornerbacks in the NFL this year. 132. Keep that number in your head. Jeff Gladney ranks 99th overall. So, I think he was lower than that at one point.
He's playing the slot. It's not simple.
40th in run defense, though.
Okay, that's great.
So top third of the league.
Nice. In
tackling, stopping the run. And that's kind of what, you're a slot corner. You're going to be more responsible sometimes for shooting the gap in those situations. Cam Dantzler, overall grade out of 132, 26th now in the NFL.
Oh, the needle moving up.
That is legit. I mean, that means he's one of the better, I guess he's one of the better starting cornerbacks in the league. He's not on that top tier, but he's emerging into a guy that could start for almost any team in the NFL, being 26th out of 132.
And since the bye week, third in overall grade, second in coverage grade, first in passer rating when targeted from Pro Football Focus, dude.
So he's picking up.
Well, he did get hurt in the Green Bay game, right? That's when he had this
big concussion.
And I believe he then missed the Bears game or the following game. So, I mean, there's a couple games there that maybe skewed a little bit, but when he's been on the field since the bye week, he's been unbelievable.
So Cam Dantzler,
third round pick,
progressing.
Right?
Yeah. Yep.
That's pretty damn good for a third round pick.
And I have one more for you here. This was just a theory that I had that I wanted to see if I could prove or disprove. We've talked a lot about the Vikings end of game and Kirk Cousins going into the last couple weeks, and he's been better the last couple weeks. Had a really bad passer rating in his career as Vikings quarterback at the end of games, last 4 minutes, right? But I'm watching this debacle at the end of the first half where they can't score all half, and they're playing the Jaguars, and they're handing off on first down, and now they're milking 30 seconds for no reason. And just like, why are you guys so bad at the end of the first half? Like, you take dumb penalties. You're handing off on first and second down and long. Like, go, throw the ball. Justin Jefferson, urgency, go, right? So I went to stathead.com and I wanted to know, over the last 3 years, end of the first half, inside of 2 minutes on first and second down. Are the Vikings, is the play calling as bad as I think it is? Are they really running the ball that often in those situations? Every time it's like, why are you running? What are you doing?
Yes.
The Vikings,
I know what the answer is.
By far, lead the NFL in rushing attempts inside 2 minutes of the first half on first and second down. They've run the ball 54 times in those situations. Again, first and second down, inside 2 minutes, end of second quarter. They've run the ball 54 times in those situations, most in the NFL the last 3 years. The next highest team is Tennessee with 47. Teams with Pat Mahomes, Drew Brees, those teams have done it like 12 times.
Your eyes did not lie.
No, they hand off
absolutely
all
confirmed.
the time on first and second down in those urgent situations. Okay, you gained 6 yards. That's great. But now you just burned 25 seconds off the clock, as you scramble to get back.
Yep. And
So-
guess what? If they take a false start and it's 2nd and 15, they're going to run too then.
I know.
It's going to be,
So stupid.
let's hand off to Dalvin. Well, but what makes no sense about that is the players around the personnel that they have that they could use that they don't use, and I don't get why.
Yeah.
And you do have, I'll go back to this. I know that he's not trusted entirely, despite the fact that he is your guy, Phil Mackey, but Kirk Cousins can make these throws. Like, we're not talking about throws he can't make.
Yeah, he can make any throw. He's Mr. Game-winning drive. He's
He
the
can
late
make
game winner.
these
He's
throws.
the fourth quarter pharaoh,
He can
dude.
make these
You sound
throws,
surprised.
and they don't. But it's almost like they don't trust him when they should trust him.
Maybe if you hadn't spent so much time this season looking at mock drafts and which quarterback they draft, you'd know these
The
things. about
BYU
Kirk.
kid, I'm now concerned. He lost to Coastal Carolina on Saturday.
Coastal Carolina is a feisty ranked team, okay?
And the BYU kid, I think, might be the only player on his team.
Coastal Carolina is
Or at least his
an
offense.
NFL factory, okay? I don't know why.
And I'm getting mixed reactions about my guy Kyle Trask of Florida.
Dex, are we going to do next week? Should we?
We can do a little.
Actually, as long as the Vikings
What if
keep
Kirk
winning, we
wins
can't-
again? You
yeah.
can't do that to your guy, Mr. Guad.
I mean, Bleacher Report had their latest mock draft on Monday. They still have the Vikings taking Zach Wilson.
That's awfully negative.
Hmm.
Why would you want to do that when you have Mr. Game-winning drive?
All right, I got
when
a
you've
stat
got
for
the
ya.
dagger doctor.
I got a stat. This cannot happen on Sunday, or the Vikings will be sunk, and your guy will be sunk, and it won't be his fault, okay? Here it is. The Jacksonville Jaguars entered last Sunday's game not only 1-10, but in those 11 games, they had a league low 11 sacks. 1 sack per game from Doug Marone's team, okay?
That's pretty bad.
On 50 dropbacks on Sunday, Kirk Cousins was sacked 4 times and was hit 14 times. On 50 dropbacks against a team that entered the game averaging 1 sack per game.
It's not ideal.
Okay, let me tell you this. If you take that act to Tampa, you ain't coming out with a W.
Yeah, it's not ideal. I think you're probably going to see a lot of classic Gary Kubiak, like 2 tight ends,
Protections.
CJ Ham.
My
in
guy
there.
Kyle will be blocking
and,
a lot.
And the only 2 routes are Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. I would be fine with that.
Second stat, KJ Osborne returned to the active roster on Sunday after being scratched from the game against Carolina because he had ball security problems against Dallas. He did fumble and recovered it, but the stat from Sunday, 21 yards on 3 punt returns, more than doubling the Vikings' previous season total season punt return yardage.
It's amazing. I think he needs a round of applause for that.
How about that, KJ Osborne? I raised my coffee to you, buddy. You still fumbled, but
He could have fallen forward 3 times and equaled the amount of yardage that they've had all season on punt returns. But we'll take it.
21 yards. But he did. My favorite thing was he fumbled, and I think you brought this point up on the postgame show, Phil. He tried to sort of like act like he didn't.
Yeah, he totally did.
He fumbled, he recovered it, and then he's like, I'm just going to leave the field now, as if the stat book wouldn't show fumble.
Offensive line notes, just last thing here on our nerd football stats. So Pro Football Focus rates all of the units. So like the Cleveland Browns have the best offensive line in the NFL, according to Pro Football Focus. Pass blocking, I think they're second in run blocking. The Vikings in pass protection are 26th out of 32 teams. And in run blocking, they are 22nd. So in both, so the run blocking matches the eye test better than the pass blocking. Both are still bottom third in the NFL.
Okay.
So, and the Cleveland Browns are at the top of both those lists now. They're number 1 in both categories, and they were not nearly that high. I think they were closer to the bottom before Kevin Stefanski got there.
Because Stefanski's known for his stout defense.
His stout. No, offensive line.
Offensive line. Sorry.
Yep, offensive
Good
run
for him.
blocking and pass blocking. So, all right, that's a wrap on this episode of Purple Daily. Tomorrow, it's our weekly State of Kirk Cousins discussion. So check us out. 7-day-a-week Vikings content.
From the number one fanboy, Kirk Cousins.
He is the fourth quarter pharaoh. Tom Brady, you're next, buddy.
He's got a list.
You're next.
See you guys tomorrow.